Okay, everybody, it's Dr. Potter again from Sanctuary Functional Medicine. I'm a functional MD who enjoys sharing what God has taught me in functional medicine and caring for patients and educating you during these Facebook Lives. We're doing another session. Today is going to be on mold in your home and how to resafe your home, which means how to make it safe again so you can live there without fear. So we're going to be doing, as usual, intro talk where I'm going to be talking through the general approach to making your home safe, and then we'll be answering questions that people have either left already, or you can still leave online on the Facebook page, and we will do our best to cover all of those or answer them later on the Facebook page as possible. With that, just remember this is an educational session. I cannot diagnose or treat especially if you're not my patient, and even if you are, it's better and necessary for us to be doing that in a one-on-one private setting where we can discuss all the factors that may be playing a part in your health. So with that, again, we're going to dig into mold in your home. Do let me know on there if you can hear, if everything's coming through well. Last week we had a little sound issue. Hopefully we have fixed that, or if there's any other problems, do let us know. So I'm just going to say that this is a little bit of a little more off the cuff than usual, just because I spent yesterday pretty much all day working on how to make my own home safe. Moved into a new home, but we are already dealing with some water issues. So you will be hearing some of the wisdom, experiential wisdom that we are going through ourselves and what we have gained from caring for hundreds of patients who have mold toxicity and how to make their home safer and free them from that illness. So with that, I just want to start off by thinking about 2 Corinthians chapter 1 was what came up in reading through the Bible this morning. Basically that Paul was suffering, so for their comfort, so that the comfort that God gives us, we can use to help others. And I will say that the wisdom I gained from my environmental consultant friend, Darren, who I'm going to talk about a little more later, from him coming down and spending a day helping me and an HVAC person and a water remediating person, all working, looking at our house together and trying to determine what the water issue is. And we believe we found it. With that, we can take that experience and help others know how to take care of their own home. Because when you're environmentally toxic, you need to not just take care of your own body, but you need to take care of the house and environment that you're living in. So with that, Proverbs also comes to mind, is just this sharing the wisdom. God shows wisdom, and we are to share that with others. And we want that wisdom to multiply across and benefit all those that we care for. So again, we're going to talk about resafing your home, making your home safe, or maybe safing it for the first time so that you can live there without being sick. First of all, we're going to talk about the overview. You want to find it, you want to fix it, you want to maintain it, and then you want to monitor it. And then lastly, there's more than mold, beyond mold, and we will get to that at the end, what other toxins can be issues, and provide some resources. So as we go through this, first of all, you want to find it. We have many patients who come to us and say, oh, we're living in a home, there's no mold here, not an issue. Well, let me just tell you, having climbed under a few houses in a new neighborhood, when they're building, if you've been in Tennessee any time in the past year, you've been seeing how much rain we've had, and you've been seeing all these houses going up at the same time. But you don't see any umbrellas, you don't see any large plastic tents, you don't see any major dehumidification systems when the wood is being sprayed and sprayed and sprayed over again with rain. There's not any products that's sprayed on that wood to prevent mold. So if you crawl into a crawl space, you will see a good bit of mold in that brand new house the moment you walk in the door with your new key. Even if you work on that and try to get things done like, say, having the wood come from an indoor lumber yard, still, it's wood. It was wet when it was cut. There's potential for mold there. So you have to think about how to get rid of that and make your home safe, even that brand new home that your dream home you just walked into, like we did just a few weeks ago. We did some different things to try to make that safe, and we'll talk through that. But if you're coming in and you're one of our patients who finds out that you're mold toxic, you have to go looking. So no home is safe New ones can be an issue. Old ones, if they're not cared for, can be a big issue. If they are well cared for, can actually be very safe. So just because a home is 20, 50, 100 years old doesn't guarantee it, although there is more opportunity in those cases for older homes. Something has gone wrong, a leak or somebody not cleaned up a water spill after that. And there's no location. So, well, should I move to the southwest? Should I move to the desert? Should I move to the beach? There is no place that's safe. If you have indoor plumbing, you have a potential for mold. If you have an RV, living in an RV, potential for mold. If you have a tent that gets wet and you do not take care of it, even a tent could grow some mold. So you want to make sure that you're on the lookout and looking for all those possible places. Again, locations, there are some websites. I need to look that up and include that in resources for today. That we'll talk about. Yes, there are some states where there's a lower risk, but you'd be surprised at what some of the higher versus lower risk are in terms of, yes, if you go to the desert, but if you live in 90-degree weather 9 months out of the year, you're going to have a very tight home as far as insulation. If you've got water in there, if you've got moisture in there, it can condense as you're cooling it, so you can still have just as bad issues there. You can have a safe home in Middle Tennessee. Takes a little bit of work planning ahead, which we'll talk about, but with that, we want to help you know how to do that without getting stuck in either having a moldy home already or moving into a new one because you're getting away from a moldy one and just walking in from the frying pan into the fryer. So with that, let's talk about how to find it. We talk a lot about the ERMI, the Environmental Relative Mold Index test, and the HRTME, which is a score from that about the 5 worst molds that can cause toxicities. Remediators typically do not like these tests. I've heard them described as, oh, well, only a surgical room could get a good ERMI score. Well, I would disagree with that. In fact, we've seen a lot of even apartments, homes, sometimes in workplaces whose ERMI score is actually pretty good. Did not have significant mold growing in that situation. So I would argue that remediators are wrong, that you have to have a surgical suite, a surgical room to get a perfect score. With that in mind, though, it is sensitive, and for our environmentally, chemically sensitive patients who are sick from mold from months to years to decades, they need to get away from it. So they do need something where it's specific enough, not just, oh, no mold here, we're all good. We need to know if it's there or not. So we do encourage patients to use that, but again, that's not the only tool. If that's all you depended on, you're missing also bacterial toxins, which we're going to talk about at the end. VOCs could be also making you sick in your new home or an old home that you've remodeled. So we want to make sure that we think broader than just mycotoxins and mold, but what else might be making you sick in that home. So it is, in a sense, remediators see this as an us versus them, ERMI versus remediators. It's just a simple tool so that way you can know third-party verification. Do you have mold in the first place? And if you do and you remediate, did you do a good enough job cleaning up? Although the ultimate question is, can you go back into your home and feel good there? Do you have symptoms when you walk back in? Do you stay there and can't sleep, or the same symptoms come back? So with that, there are other testing. You can hear using plates where they're like little petri dishes sitting out in a room, see if anything grows, or send that in to see if they can identify what grew from that. You can also do air sampling where you take either with a vacuum or just setting out a dust collection kit. You can do that indoor versus outdoor to see if there's more inside your home than outside, or if it's the same molds coming in from the outdoors. There are swabs that you can test. It all depends on the situation. An ERMI is a great first step. It doesn't mean that you don't use any of the other ones. But as I say over and over again, would you go into doing some type of mechanical work with only one tool? Would you just carry a hammer? Would you just carry a screwdriver? Just carry a drill? No, you carry all the tools that might be potentially needed, even if you don't use them all. So with this, when you're testing for mold, when you're remediating mold, keep all the tools in mind, use the ones that are appropriate for your situation, and don't let your remediator talk you out of using something that might be helpful to find that mold. Now, if mold does show up on that ERMI/HRTME test, we do recommend that you call the remediator to find it. Now, some patients come in and say, oh yeah, we know where it's growing. It's in the living room or the bathroom or wherever under the crawl space. We know that. Now, some will choose to do some remediation on their own. We do recommend at least getting an evaluation by a remediator to see one cost, see if they see any other mold, or you may not know why that mold's growing there, and having someone who can help you determine why is there moisture, because it's not just about the mold, it's the moisture. You can get rid of the mold, but if you don't take care of the moisture, that mold can grow back, or bacteria or other things can grow back. So you do want to get a professional at least help, even if you're paying for an assessment, to say these are the different issues, both in the short term, visible things, and the long term, maybe invisible things that you wouldn't have seen on your own. Now, to fix those things, remediators, just like I talked about going into a project with all the different tools you want that you might use, remediators need to have those tools. There are some basic guidelines that we recommend for our patients when working with remediators. We have had a mix of remediator success in terms of there's some situations where any remediator could come in and hit a home run and patients do better. Those are great because they're pretty easy and patients get better pretty quick. There are others where they have spent a few weeks or months to dig out one after another source of mold in a home that may have been there decades, and it's not always easy. It's nice when it's easy, but we have many who do go through several iterations of poking in walls, removing things, replacing things. We feel very much understand, having gone through with a rental house. Just the landlord was helpful, but between fixing leaks, replacing baseboards, fixing water leaks in bathrooms, pulling up carpet and waiting for them to replace it, it was like one thing after another until we ended up moving out of that house, which is a possibility. Some people find that there comes a point where do you stay and fight, or do you determine that, oh, it's better to cut your losses and look for a new rental or a new owning a home somewhere else. That is something that you have to pray through. Uses a lot of wisdom. We try to help guide patients in that, but ultimately everybody's set point to where it's time for them to say goodbye is a little bit different. So, but the basics, first of all, you want someone to help you find the mold and find all of it. Second of all, when they say, here's how they want to fix it, is they have a plan. It's not like, oh, we're just going to do this and this and this. No, put it on paper. Say, we're going to, number one, mold is here. Number two, we are going to remove it. Number three, with these methods, meaning you want to containment. Containment means you have some plastic up where any mold that you're pulling out does not send spores to the rest of your house. Preferably a negative pressure. That's kind of a critical thing, is blowing that air outside your home, not back into the rest of your home, and that you don't walk back and forth in those areas, or other workers dragging spores back and forth, and your whole home becomes even worse than it was in the first place. So contain, you want to remove it safely, zip it up, sterilize. So then afterwards, the big source, you want to go back and either use a fogging product, which there's several out there. We have different situations. Some can be better than others. Wipe down, so don't just fog, but also wipe down the surfaces. Horizontal and vertical surfaces. Belongings need to be considered in that, including wiping down any dust anywhere that you find in your house, even looking at the ceilings, of running over those where dust is collected in corners and so forth. With that, you want to have a process. And then once you finish that process, you want to go back and say, all right, we finished the plan, let's test. The levels are here, we want them lower, are they low enough? And then ultimately, you want to go back and say, can you go back in that house without getting sick? And stick to the plan. Don't, now, if you find more mold or something's not as simple as you thought it was at the beginning, yes, you have to change the plan, but then you are sticking to the plan that you are doing a plan. Just don't get distracted. The other thing, considering ductwork, if there's much mold in your house, it's going to collect in your ductwork for your HVAC. You want to make sure it's clean. You want to evaluate all belongings. So if your furniture, stuffed animals, clothes, everything has to be considered. If there's growing mold on it, probably needs to be thrown away unless it's something you just is irreplaceable. Then you can pay the extra money to have that remediated. But it is everything needs to be considered, whether it's fogged, whether it's cleaned, whether it's washed in laundry. To remove that, we've washed loads of clothing in anti-mold cleaners in order to be able to feel safe that that is not going to be an issue. We also make sure that we wash any clothes that we purchase at a store. Sometimes those stores can have mold, and those smells will come back, and my family react. Especially if you're getting several clothes at once, we will wash those. Then again, ask if you're better. Now, we're going to talk about this more in a moment, but ask if mold's the only sensitivity. You're immediately home, remediate, and then you use a bunch of paint that smells and has VOCs, or you buy new furniture that's got a lot of formaldehyde. It could be that you're reacting not to mold in the home, that may be gone, but it could be that you're reacting to these other chemicals. Many mold patients have a lot of chemical sensitivities. They're reactive to perfumes, to cleaning products, to pesticides. You want to make sure that something's not happened that actually made your home toxic in a different way. Which is when it gets back to which is the right fogging agent. Some patients will be sensitive to different ones. Some leave residues behind that help kill mold, but those residues can trigger chemically sensitive patients to be even worse. So with that, afterwards we want to maintain, we want to stop water entry. So once we've done all the work to clean it, Hermie test is good, you're back in your home, you're safe. You want to make sure you maintain a safe home. You resafed it, you want to maintain a safe home. Stop water entry. Anytime if there's any leaks, if there's any water coming under the house, which is what we're dealing with, that appears possibly to be a leaking irrigation pipe in the front, may be the reason why water is coming under a crawl space and having to fix that. We're hoping to find out more in the next day or two if that is the issue. Use filters and air purifiers. So using good filters on your air intake, making or installing those further air filtration systems into your HVAC system. Buying something like an Austin Air, IQ Air. There are some different products out there that can help clean the air, not just from the particulates like mold spores, but the toxins with the carbon filters. HEPA gets rid of the particulates. Carbon filters will remove a lot of the VOCs and the odors. And you can look at ionizing systems like the Molecule or IQ Air systems in which they actually send out ions to break those things down. You want to make sure that you keep the humidity down. Humidity, even if everything looks dry, if you have 60 or 70% humidity, that can allow mold to grow. So you want to keep it at least below 50. We aim for around 40 in our house, if at all possible, both that in our crawl space. Where we're getting the water cleaned up from. You want to avoid dust. Not that I tell patients, I'm not accusing you of not being a good house cleaner, but that dust is organic material, and mold can live there. And if you let it build up and there's a little moisture comes in or a little drop of water, you can have mold spores settle and grow there. So keep the humidity down, keep the dust down, use a HEPA vacuum. So whenever you're pulling that up, if there are more mold spores already growing, you don't spread them because they get caught in the HEPA filter net. Consider self-fogging intermittently. There are some safe essential oil type products using thieves oil to diffuse or similar products to thieves oil. It's a Young Living product, but there's other brands out there that you can use. Would not use the cheapest. You want ones that have do have the real oils, but something that can kill that. This fogging, you can buy your own fogging equipment. You have to have careful with it. I'm not the first one to recommend on how to do that. We have done a little bit of that ourselves. I do feel like it's beneficial, but you can talk to some of those companies that sell those products. Again, make sure your ductwork stays clean. Once you clean it, you want to go back and probably at least every year or two having somebody go through and make sure there's no dust, or the part you can see running a vacuum hose down there and not leaving food falling down to, if kids are dropping food, that you're removing that. Monitor, we are having a flood sensor put into our crawl space. That way, once we get the water that's there cleaned up, if there's water come back in there, we will know right away, not a week or two or a month later, to fix that. Visual inspections, knowing your house, especially if you own it. If you're renting, at least keeping an eye on things visibly, walking around your attic and your crawl space, looking if there's any signs of moisture intrusion, looking for animals. If you have pests like rats, mice, that can be a sign that there is opening for water intrusion, or that they're leaving things behind after they're done that could potentially grow mold. So that's always an issue. We've had some patients where their big mold infestation was a rat's nest or a mouse nest under the house. So you want to keep those guys out as well. Filter changes, making sure that filters, either installed or ones that you're purchasing, that you do change those regularly to keep them clean and functioning well. It's also good for blocked up filter can damage your HVAC if it's having to pull air through there. Now, we talked about beyond mold is there are some things besides mold that can make people sick. And if you have mold toxicity, you often develop chemical sensitivity. So you want to make sure VOCs, anything from perfumes to formaldehyde off-gassing from a new home or a new construction or remodeled construction, off OSB boards, off treated lumber, the paint that you use can release VOCs that you can have tested. You can pay for that. There are tests that you can do that. My friend Darren from Healthy Exposures in Minnesota is able to do that. He's working on being able to do that from a distance outside of Minnesota. So that would be a service in the future. But you can find out, oh, do you have formaldehyde? Do you have these other toxins in the air that you're not just mold toxic, but you're also VOC toxic? They can be from gas stoves. They can be from paint. Cleaning products, it's like a fish tank. Would you put cleaning product down a fish tank? Or why do we put nasty toxic chemicals in our house? It's like our fish tank. Pesticides from your neighbors or herbicides that you use or your neighbors use. So trying to find ways to prevent that from entering your house. Keep it, taking your shoes off that you walk through your yard or your neighbor's yard before you come in and bring those in to leave on your floors. Looking at dust in new construction. So if you built a house, it is filled with dust. So we went through and wiped down every surface in our new home before we moved in. And then we had the ducts cleaned as well, that they came and made them spotless so that we're not inhaling dust particles into our lungs that can either lodge there and cause inflammation, or sometimes if they're small enough, actually go straight into our bloodstream. So with that, we're going to post some further resources where you can look up some other information to find out about how to care for your home. And if you're a patient, you hear a lot from us how we're learning again from 2 Corinthians to the comfort that God gives us in our struggles and our storms of going through mold toxicity in my family. We are trying to use that for good so that others can benefit from that. With that, I'm going to now take the next, about 30 minutes or so to answer some questions. If you have them, please keep sending them. And hopefully, again, this is something useful. Can't diagnose or treat. This is not a substitute for a doctor visit. Don't just do something we recommend without considering whether it is appropriate for you or not. But let's look at some of the questions that came in. Dr. Potter, I live in a new apartment building in downtown Nashville. Even though it's new, I'm seeing signs of mold. Run the diffuser that dispenses pure oil and a good brand. I use a product called Concrobium mold control spray when I see mold. Use filtered water for drinking and cooking, but there's still mold. Even tested for it, and it's more than I should be living in. Not certain that even if I moved, I could get rid of it. Put a filter in my bathroom faucet, but I also think I need one in my shower head. Since I do not own the apartment, what else can I do? So thank you, Melinda. With that, yes, that is, we have a number of patients who are in rental situations, whether it's an apartment or a home, a house, and they don't have as much control, or especially over their neighbors if they're in an apartment complex where their neighbor could be overflow a toilet or flood something above them, below them, next to them, and it can trigger mold. So in that situation, you can do things to knock the level down as much as possible, different products. Concrobium is one of those fogging agents. It can leave behind some phosphate residues. Some people can be sensitive to that, so it's not one of our first line of defenses, although I have one particular patient who felt that that was a huge part on cleaning their ductwork in their home when they were not able to afford a complete, $10,000 or more worth of ductwork. They were able to get that done and have a safe home from that. With that, you're already doing a lot of the things that we have talked about that are important. It is a lot of vigilance. And then again, sometimes it comes to the point of, oh, is this apartment complex one that is safe, depending on age, depending on how it's maintained. If it's in a lot of woods where there's a lot of moisture, you can really go a long way with air purifiers and dehumidifiers, but there is a certain point where you can't do that because there is just too much there. But keeping the humidity around 40%, using the air purifiers like we mentioned before, and just being diligent. Also making sure that you're in, if that apartment complex has carpet, you're going to have some issues there. Again, keeping the humidity down, the pure air purifier going as much as possible. But it is a difficult battle. I don't have a specific answer, but those are the starting points. And continue the oil, continuing buying some of the fogging spray. We're able to fog, wet fog yourself that leaves some essential oil residues around ever so often to try to prevent regrowth, either whole apartment or parts of that apartment. Another question from Margie is, what's the best way to reduce the mold content, which we don't see in a partially finished basement? Tile on the floor, normal ceiling, washing machine, and dryer. We have a sump pump. Before we lived there, there's water in the basement during severe flooding in our town. Starting spring, typically wear a mask to do laundry. No one else in my house has issues. So thank you for that. That is, if you're having to wear a mask, those clothes that you're washing are going to be carrying some of that mold and some of those toxin smells. So even when you're not wearing a mask upstairs but wearing the clothes, you're going to be affected. And she mentioned the fact that not everyone, she's the only one in her home that has sensitivities. Typically about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 patients in the world in any population can't detox well from mold, and the other 3 or 4 out of those does pretty well and doesn't get sick. So she's the only one suffering. With that, there are ways to make a basement safe. You basically have to do some type of encapsulation. Sump pumps help remove water, but there can be some residual moisture, especially if there's some organic material in that water that's sitting before it pumps. You can get some smells, bacterial and mold growing there. You want to have some air ventilation. Basically, the simplest way my friend Darren from Healthy Exposures would say is you want to treat the air in a way that you're controlling that environment. You want to make that basement or crawl space air just as safe to live in, just as breathable as your first floor, second floor, wherever else, and your attic, the same eventually. Now, with all that, you can, and I do see dollar signs adding up with that. So you have to take that in stages and do as much as you can. It might start with putting a dehumidifier in that basement, an air purifier, sealing off any water leaks that are visible, removing any visible mold using a HEPA sander if it's on wood, or cutting materials out of, say, drywall, having to remove those. And then looking at using some of those fogging sprays where you kill that. You may have to come back every 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months to do that, but using some things to try to knock that level down. Essential oil products are good. There's some hydrogen peroxide products like MDF as another one that can do that. Do be careful, MDF can corrode some metal pipes, so you want to be careful using that too much, which is why the essential oils, there's a little better ongoing products to use. So there are ways you can do it. You can do a lot of that yourself. There are some places out there where you can get a plan and then do it yourself. Or there's, you can hire somebody who basically does it from A to Z, from beginning to end, to help make that a safe place. So those are a few of the things to start with. And again, maybe getting somebody to give you a consult out there to say, hey, here's some starting points. Next is from Emily. When leaving a home with mold, what can be taken with you and what should be left behind so one doesn't cross-contaminate a new home? So this is a concept you'll see online. If you have mold toxicity, you need to run out the door with nothing on except your underwear and start all over. And yes, there are some patients I've known that probably are that sensitive, or their stuff was so contaminated from years of mold that they did have to do that. So, but I would say that's more the exception. Everybody, now the other exception is some people, oh, there was a little mold, they got rid of it, or they changed jobs and all of a sudden they're feeling a ton better. That's the other exception, small percentage. Vast majority of everybody else is in the middle where they have to at the least consider every personal belonging, whether it's every book, whether it's every piece of clothing, and consider, is there mold contamination? If there is, you probably need to get rid of it. If there's not, then if there's not visible mold, there still could be invisible mold that you want to get rid of by either fogging or some type of cleaning product. Hard surfaces can be wiped down. Porous surfaces, you can either use thieves oil diffusion or some of those other fogging products I talked about. So with that, I can take 100 mold patients and all their belongings, and for each one it's going to look a little different. It is even more unique. We do personalized medicine here in how we treat patients, but in treating homes, your home is even more different, each one. Some basic rules. Again, you contain, you negative air pressure, you have a plan, you go through that, you retest, you make sure it's down. But from there, with your personal belongings, you need to think about, or is this furniture that was in a moldy house before, or we just bought it 2 months ago and we can clean it and rescue it. Mattresses may or may not be safe. When we bought new mattresses, we did throw away our old ones. We kept them in plastic bags until we could, and did thieves oil diffusion as well. But until we moved out of the place that was moldy, we kept them in plastic bags. The box springs actually can be a little worse in terms of harboring mold. So you want to consider those, or we now sleep on a platform instead of a mattress on a box spring. We use a platform to raise the bed up so that we're not having box springs that have mold in them. So it's a step-by-step. We're working this year on a little better guide, a more extensive guide, more than just general principles, but it is something that each person has to just take time. It's not something you do in one day. It may take weeks or 2 or 3 months to sort through and determine. We put a lot of stuff in storage. We still haven't brought it out yet. We'll pull that out, and if we react to it, we'll either clean it or throw it away. We're working through that even for 9 months later from moving out of that house. Another question from Tammy: do you have to test each room for mold? Where's the best place to test for mold? So when we're first starting, we want to know, where are you there the most, in the living area or bedroom, or if somebody has suspicion, when I go into this room, it's musty, I feel weird, or I feel sick in this room, or wake up in the morning with headaches. We're going to have them test the place, or they had a water leak in the kitchen. Say, let's start with ground zero suspect. And we may sometimes have patients do too, but typically if there's enough mold in one place to make someone sick, it's spread throughout the house enough that we can pick it up to know, you need to remediate, or you don't need to do another ERMI test for that. So it all depends. We do, again, recommend the ERMI HERTSMI test, but there are other ones to look at. It's just they are a little bit harder to interpret based on how much they're going to affect our patient's health. So for Ruby, I wasn't able to open the link. I have a couple of questions. How do you differentiate between mold and VOCs without having anything tested? You really can't, unless you know that some specific, you test it outside where you're only testing one at the time and you only react to one or the other. If you react to both, it's probably a combination of both. So without testing, it would be hard to know that. What are some of the best methods for cleaning mold when it is found? So with that, it depends on what it's in. Hard surfaces, you might do a thieves oil cleaner, some of the fungicide type things where you'll wipe it down. Steven, close the door. Wipe it down. We're just getting a little noise from outside, so we're going to try to quieten it down a little bit there, in case you're hearing what's going on in the office today. So with that, best methods for testing or cleaning. So there's different products. Again, it depends on what if you're looking at a porous like couches, clothes, there's some things out there. Borax can be something you wash your clothes in to knock those levels down. You can use things like essential oil cleaners for the laundry. There are things you can do for fogging, again, different dry or wet agents where you can fog and penetrate deeper into materials. So it all depends. Again, though, if you have a big mold growth growing into drywall, do not try to clean out the surface. It's going to come back. You want to take that out. If it's something you can get rid of, do it. There are situations where people have antiques that are irreplaceable, so they may go an extra mile to try to kill that off and then seal that. So those are things you can do. But if if you can't get rid of it, it is better if you see the mold. If it's invisible mold, there are some other products that I went through there. What's the best method for handling cross-contamination? If you can set up, if you're remediating, is keep those areas separate with negative pressure, meaning air's filtered from one place, pushed in there, and pulled out and shot out a window or some kind of exhaust. So that way that air is not coming back into the house. And if somebody's walking between those areas, that they're either wearing like a Tyvek suit to unzip like the hazard mat suits, not quite that extensive, but enough where they're not carrying spores back and forth. Or if you're, we've had patients where bags of mold materials were being carried out and dropped and burst in their one of their rooms, and that obviously contaminated everything. So you want to have it bagged well, safely, and try to avoid that. It's kind of common sense things to think through. Let's see, we're doing pretty good on time here. All right, I got another, a longer multi-part question. We're going to kind of work through this one at a time. So this is from Tina. Live in a beautiful log home in Middle Tennessee, no drywall anywhere. Home was built an unfinished cinder block basement. It's built inside of a hill. Fortunately, there's an underground spring directly behind the back basement wall. Developed a mold problem in the corner of her basement and some other hidden places, and since I've had her home remediated twice, along with dealing with the cause of water intrusions. Had her home remediated once in the summer of 2017 by a company in Atlanta. Used essential oils and did a complete vacuum and wipe down the entire house, thus throwing out much of our possessions and tearing up floors and replacing French doors. However, post-ERMI testing was not that much better than pre-testing. Did a second round of cleaning and purging and vacuuming and wiping last fall with MDF. There are dehumidifiers running on every floor. Installed 4 air cleaners, 2 Austin Air, 1 air doctor, and 1 molecule, 3 months after moving in. Our 3 sick people are only mildly improving after 4 months back in the home. All that is background for my questions. So number 1, we want to do another round of ERMI or HERTMI. Since we didn't install the air cleaners until 3 months after moving in, should we give the house a thorough dusting and then let dust build up in hopes of getting a more accurate test of the air with cleaners running? Or should we go ahead and do the test now because waiting won't make that much difference? What we usually recommend is a post-remediation ERMI. There is a video out there. I don't have the link. It's got a lot of funny digits in it. So I'll just say if you look up post-remediation ERMI testing, what it is taking a black plastic bag, cutting it open from the inside out, putting it up on a wall, folding up the bottom of that with tape, taping it up on the interior wall, not near a window or door, and letting dust collect on that plastic and fall down into that little fold you folded up like a little envelope. When you see that there's enough there, you then use that for the ERMI test to determine whether or not there's new, because that's what's floating in the air, not what happened to be caught in a corner or on top of a door frame that's been there for 5 years. So that's what we'd recommend. We do recommend going through and do as much of the dusting, cleaning, wiping down as you're going to do before that, and then leave that up. Usually takes about 3 or 4 weeks to get enough dust that you can send that in to test. If you don't get enough dust, it can be a false test, false positive or negative. It just throws things off. You also, during that time, don't want to do any essential oil products. There are a number of things that can interfere with the ERMI testing, essential oils being one of those, but clay and some other materials. So don't, any essential oils that gets into that dust may show a false negative, meaning it could be there, but that oil interferes with being able to find it. So keep that, avoid from that. But that's how we recommend to really get a sense of that the real air you're breathing right then for the past few weeks while you're doing that test. Can our 4 air cleaners and 2,200 square foot home that are exchanging air 3 times per hour keep the home safe enough for healing even the occasional musty smell? We do have some patients who say are in a dorm for another 2 or 3 months, or they're in a lease where they can't get out for 6 months, who find a measure of relief with air purifiers and dehumidifiers if they find the main source and kind of limit that. But I will say it's hard, and they often have a lot of ups and downs. It's not a more steady improvement, so it's possible, but I would say 100% better, probably not. If you're smelling musty smells, there's enough going on there, and there are probably a lot of things you don't smell, like bacterial toxins and so forth. The next one, a washing machine in the basement drains into an open pipe. Could that be a source of toxic mold, and how can keep this clean? So if you mean that the water is going in and you literally could look in and see that water going through it, yes, you're going to have, that's why on the plumbing in a house, they have ways of preventing gases coming back up. That's the P-trap, where it goes down and there's a little water sitting, whether it's a toilet, whether it's a sink. You can see that doing like that. If not, gases would come backwards from all your plumbing system. So if there's an opening, that is absolutely a place where gases can come up. And definitely, even if it's not mold, it can be bacterial toxins, which are another type of VOCs. Can you recommend a great mold inspector in Middle Tennessee? Right now, I would say there are a number out there. We don't recommend one specifically. We have a few on our list. We want patients to get two opinions. That way, if different ones will see different things sometimes, and you get a fuller picture. Two, that one that we might recommend might not be the best fit in your situation. So we try to offer a few different ones, have you get two or three different opinions, and then you can we can help you sort through which is the best option for you depending on your situation. I have a wonderful library, about 2,000 books I've collected over the past 25 years of homeschooling, boxed up and stored away from our home currently. Can I save any of these books? Some smell musty or like old books because they are. Others are newer. Can I in good conscience sell these books? I hate to throw them away. So first of all, I'll tell you what we did. We had several shelves of books, and we took several boxes to either Goodwill or threw a lot away that we were pretty sure nobody would care about otherwise. My library's been thinned, and I still have a lot of my library of a few hundred books in storage. Now, we have been able to salvage a lot of those that were not bad. If you see mold on it, probably not going to work. But if it's just some funny smell or kind of feel funny when you're around those, you can put those down in bins and do essential oil diffusion. We've done that anywhere from 6 to 24 hours. Saved my Bible from being replaced with all my notes in it is one way to do that. You can do some fogging. If you're fogging your home, you can set those books. The pages have to be open, can't be closed, because you're really not getting those materials, oil or fog, in there like that. So that way those whatever mold killing, toxin destroying aspects get all the way in there. And then you test that. We've technically did both fogging with MDF and using essential oil diffusion to make some books safe again for us. And then again, we threw a lot away, realized we weren't going to use them. And some that were replaceable and were cheap, we just bought more. So I do understand we had few hundred books stacked up on baker's racks with the pages all open so we could fog and oil diffuse them. So it is possible. It just takes a lot of work, and then you determine whether or not you want that work or not. When you sell a home, you have to leave because you're genetically predisposed to CRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Others may be perfectly fine in the house. What do you have to disclose when selling? So that is a legal question that I'm not going to answer specifically because I don't have the legal aspect to that, but I can say that if it is something that is under normal, pretty much all houses have at least a few dots of mold in them. The question is it enough to make someone sick? That person, if someone knows they're mold toxic, they need to know better to do an ERMI before they buy that house, which is what we recommend. Or if they go into the house, when we were looking for our new house last year, we walked into many. We then walked out because as soon as my wife could tell, no, this house has mold. So to some degree, unless that mold is doing damage or there's water. So if you do know that you've got a spring in your house or a spring behind your house, that you probably need to disclose. But again, that would be something I would probably ask a real estate agent or a real estate attorney a little bit more about how far you have to go in disclosure. If there's been water damage, typically that is expected. If there was a water leak, that you include that and include what work was done and anything you're aware of that was done to fix that. FYI, when we did our wet remediation, we tore up the floor in the main kitchen, dining room, living area because of a sink leak. However, we found a horrible large area of mold just inside the French doors. We had no idea it was there. Even rotted a hole through the base of the door. So mold can hide anywhere. Yes, that is one of the things that new house, old house, drywall, no drywall, you can have mold in all kind of crazy places. And if you keep feeling sick in your home, we do recommend people to keep looking. Now, again, we also encourage them to look at VOCs and other things that might be making them sick. But to keep looking for those different possible places mold can be hiding. Another question, yes, from Tina. Since we aren't sure if our home is safe for our CRS family members, would it be beneficial to have them move into a tent or camper in your yard? They need to move farther away from the home and possibly out of Middle Tennessee for a while. Lived in a very clean home in Colorado for 11 weeks last summer, and they took binders, but did not feel much improvement. How does the mold sabbatical place how clean does the mold sabbatical place have to be to see improvement? How long can it take? So that is a multi-layered question, so I'm going to try to cover all those, hopefully in a systematic order. Number one, how long can it take? For kids, they may be better in 1, 2, 3, 4 months. For someone who only had a recent exposure, say in a new job, and started getting sick, we've had patients change jobs and say, oh, I'm 90% better in 2 months. At the next visit, or may say they were 90% better in 1 month. So we do see some rapid changes. However, I say that's mainly the kids and mainly a short exposure. A lot of our patients, if not the majority, have been in mold longer. And if they are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, especially up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, having either dementia or memory loss issues, they can take 6, 9, 12, even 24 or 36 months, so up to 2 or 3 years to see major improvements. Their early improvements, especially with Alzheimer's, we would say, don't expect much for the first year because those toxins may have built up for a few decades. It may take a while to not only get the toxins out, but also to get the body systems to function. If they haven't functioned correctly for 40 years or 50 or 60, you're not going to turn that battleship around overnight. So in terms of your family members, again, I can't give specifics without knowing the full story, but I would say, depending on their age and depending on how long they've been exposed to mold, is going to determine how long they need away from it. They may be away from it and take binders for 6 or 12 months and not necessarily get better. That doesn't mean they don't have mold toxicity, which is why we do prefer using some tests to see if patients are still reacting to mold, rather than just winging it or guessing by symptoms or just guessing by using urine tests, which are not, that's another story for another day, helpful, but not a definitive factor in determining when or if somebody truly has mold toxicity. So with that, yes, some will live in their tents and campers. You make sure an RV doesn't, patients have water leaks in RVs, and then the RV has mold. So you want to make sure those are safe. RVs can also be very chemically toxic in terms of all the plastics and materials they use, the glues. So it depends on that, before I would say, yeah, you should go stay in an RV for a month or 6 months while you're remediating. You may want to, one, sleep in that RV for a night, if possible, to see if you react being in there. Or you may want to, you definitely want to do some things for that in terms of either essential oil products, fogging, some type of cleaning, making sure that you're not going to get sicker in that situation. But it all depends on the person. So like I said, the personalized medicine for the person, and we're also personalized environmental medicine for the house or living environment that they're in. So hopefully that helps. Again, I can't give specific answers, but that gives you a start on thinking through it. Got time for a couple more questions. One, Landlord-Tenant Act. Landlord-Tenant Act is a legal route for the renter. Yes, Greg. So there are some legal protections if you are a renter, and you can show that a rental unit or a home is unsafe, that you can get kind of legal remedies for that, for either forcing them to do some cleanup or letting you out of a lease. It takes a little bit of work. It's not easy. The best is if you can do some arbitration or discussion with them and convince them to kind of depart on friendly terms if possible. But yes, there are some ways that you could go in and say, yes, we have a legal claim that this is not a safe place. If there's ongoing water damage, if someone's not, their issue's not been remediated, you can take legal action. Cynthia, are Norwex microfiber cloths effective for cleaning, dusting, non-porous surfaces? I cannot say that I know the definite answer to that from as far as Norwex. I do know that microfiber are going to supposedly do a little better cleaning. You can use, there's a lot of different types of cloths. You do not want to use dirty ones, obviously. You want to use ones that do a good job of catching that. If you're wiping and there's tons of dust left behind, you're probably not getting as much benefit from that. But you also, the other thing is using again, if it's something that on which you could use a HEPA vacuum, you can do that, and you can do a mix. You could, use those microfiber cloths for an average cleaning, and then making sure every once a week, once a month, whatever you determine, you can tell needs a little extra dusting, using that HEPA vac as a way to remove more of that dust, which again is a potential place for organic material which mold can grow on. So we're going to wrap it up with that. I thank everybody who has joined me today. I hope this has been beneficial. We look forward to caring for our patients, and if you're not our patient, we are taking patients. Stephen, 615-815-5941 can help you get plugged in with us. If not, and you are seeing someone else for a mold detox, we hope this has still been helpful. We can share that with others. And we pray that as we ourselves, like I said, we are hoping to get our crawl space, the water intrusion taken care of, if it truly is a irrigation line that is causing an issue, so that we can feel safe in our home and not worry about that. But we will be, again, putting a flood detector just in case there's any water under there. We will catch it as soon as possible. With that, I look forward to our next session, which I think autoimmune disease, and it is on, I believe, April 9th, May 9th. May 9th appears to be the next time. We'll be talking about autoimmune disease and mold toxicity. Until then, we pray that you're having a blessed day, and look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.